Alright, what do we have this week in the news? Developers showing their true colors, YouTube viewership drops, Borderlands 4 is off to a quote great start. All that and more on this week's Old Man Rages at the News for the 15th of September 2025. Before we get into this dumpster fire of a week, hit the like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Our first story this week is a wild one, and I hope nothing happens to the video because of it. Now, I want to start this off by saying, if you celebrate someone's death just because you disagree with what they were doing, you obviously need help. Well, here we go. Developers are celebrating Charlie Kirk's death. One of them is Sucker Punch senior developer, you know, the people who work on Ghost of Yotei. She wrote, and I quote, "I hope the shooter's name is Mario so that Luigi knows his bro got his back." And reposted another person's tweet that called Charlie Kirk a transphobic racist bigot. Oh boy, we're off to a great start. Michael over here also pointed out that a number of game devs are liking the post. And shortly after, the Sucker Punch senior dev got fired over celebrating the death of the guy as shown by this Blue Sky post. The tweet itself isn't enough to confirm the firing, but it's a start. Maybe the studio will show us soon enough. However, that isn't enough. They went on LinkedIn in order to complain about beautiful women, out of all things, in video games. It was them complaining about men making women physically attractive. And before you ask, yes, you can add it to your bingo cards. While going on their Blue Sky account, I have to censor part of the name because, you know, it contains a no-no word that specifically YouTube and the Germans in general will probably know what it is. Thanks, Chief. At least now you can have all the time in the world to fight the supposed fight you are in. Who knows? Maybe the voices in your head will stop one day, but that's a bit too much to ask. Side note, the word that YouTube hates, you can add that on your bingo cards. This became such a celebration for the Blue Sky community that Blue Sky itself had to issue warnings to its user base about the celebration. The echo chamber had to put brakes on this. Imagine that! Instead of the logical thing being to step on the brakes though, they started getting pissy. All because the platform they're on is beginning to crack down on this. And before some freedom-loving person says First Amendment rights, they are free to say what they want, and of course to live with the consequences of it. Now, since recording, this situation has progressed, and there will be continuations of it next week with new updates. And now, for this month's YouTube is breaking moment. Fun times await YouTube HQ yet again, because this time it's their algorithm fucking up. Why? Well, apparently Linus Tech Tips has seen massive and sudden drop in viewership. The interesting part about this statement is he mentioned that YouTube memberships could be, quote, killed because members-only posts clutter the channel and may contain, quote, valuable impressions on public views. Small context for those who don't know. Impressions are given to YouTubers based on a metric and it resets daily. If the algorithm suggests a video to someone, that channel uses up the impression regardless if it's clicked or not. Another thing he did is question the heavy use of YouTube's title and thumbnail A/B testing, both being a feature allowing you to test which title and thumbnail will give you more views. He even suggested it could waste, quote, precious early hours on weaker variants if the team already has a likely, quote, best hitter. And I agree with him. YouTube is slowly making things worse and worse for YouTube creators, and it's hard for them to catch a break and get used to the new stuff. At least Team YouTube clarified that members-only videos do not impact channel performance. This time, I'll believe them. Why? More on that later. There has been speculations that the restricted mode that nuked most viewable videos, with Josh Strife showing off his channel and which videos got removed because of the mode. Yet again though, Team YouTube did reply saying it's off by default. I do also want to admit personally I had that mode off by default too alongside my editor. But I've heard from friends who use YouTube they had it turned on without consent. So it's anybody's guess if it's a bug or YouTube's talking out of its ass. Josh Strife did also make a video on this topic too with his own data, so go give it a watch. It's surprisingly enlightening in terms of what restricted mode hides. They aren't the only ones that covered this. Endymion talked about it with Naxtaku, and Kershaw also replied to his tweet, basically saying it's happening to them too. And YouTube is once again not willing to talk with content creators. Shocking, I know. Now, that's what I would have ended this segment, but another British man dropped a video basically saying, here's the real reason. Thanks, Biffin Brit. Go watch his video too. I believe his video basically explains a good portion of what's happening on this platform. And I personally don't want to spoil the whole video, so, go give it a watch. It's quite entertaining as well. Not biased at all or anything. And in other news, well, here we are again. This is the thing I was expecting to happen while writing last week's topic on Marathon. And apparently I can see the future. Despite having an NDA, there are leaks about the game. Surprising, I know. The leaker was calling it Deeks on X, but the images were removed by Bungie themselves. Yeah. Oh well. According to the article, there is a new UI update, all 6 of Marathon's core factions are playable, and a total visual overhaul alongside the new runner. Now, total visual overhaul is pushing it a bit, but yeah. Here's the kicker. Looking at this said new runner, there doesn't seem to be any visual overhaul whatsoever. It looks like the same as the previous public beta test, and to some, it seems they are just trying to actively gaslight us, the consumers, into believing that the dogshit game they're making is finally good. And in the words of a certain green-faced character from a movie in 1994, all I'm gonna say is, I don't think so. Moving on, Paradox is back at it again. They're issuing refunds, though only for the PlayStation Store, for Bloodlines 2, and is working on big changes. These changes will be coming on the 17th of September, and they're claiming that these changes are big and, quote, we want to do this right. The response to this is mixed at best, as shown by IGN, or extremely bad at worst, so unless Paradox does something paradoxical, all puns intended, and adds the DLC into the base game, we might not see a positive response to this. For now, all we can do is wait and see, while also voicing our opinions. Moving on, according to people on the internet, Silksong's price tag will make it harder to price their games. Man, talk about not having confidence in the product you made. First, you have this guy saying the game should cost $40, and he isn't joking. As much as I wish, his whole statement is on the screen, but the TLDR is, because of the low investment and the low price of the game, it makes it harder to compete with it. It makes sense, but at the same time, if they just made a good game as well, it would make them more competitive. Not to mention the development of this game was 6 years since they released the trailer for it. Mind you, this game was originally planned as DLC, with a handful of core developers. And them asking $20 for a game speaks volume about their confidence in their product. We also have another dev making a smaller Metroidvania game that was planned to be $20, and now they're confused on what they should price their game. This is another fair argument, but as IGN pointed out, most of the people encourage them to price it at $20. The reason why, as I cover this old news, is to mention that this could be a turning point where we can make game prices more affordable. and that's good for the customer. Now, on to the actual news though. Silksong managed to reach 5 million players in the first 3 days, and to top it all off, it sold 3 million copies on Steam. They also released a patch fixing bugs and reducing early on difficulty for the bosses Moonlight and Sister Splinter. And in other news, Visa was trying to insert itself as a company that influences culture in video games. Thankfully, they did abandon that idea later on, but it isn't looking good for gamers, cause they're still controlling what people can buy, like I mentioned last week. It all makes sense now, doesn't it? When they started censoring the gaming industry. Oh brother, they're butthurt because they couldn't get into the gaming industry. Now, who would have thought there are 3rd graders on the board of directors for Visa? Certainly not me. Moving on. Sweet Baby Inc. is back with its comedically bad slop. This time is Wolverine franchise. Now, this isn't the first time this has happened because in June last year, it was said that they are involved in the making of it. Even Master of the TDS reminded us that Sweet Baby Inc. worked on Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine using their tweet from 2021. The article also mentioned a few things that I want to go over. Before I mention other, quote, journalists here, it's confirmed that Sweet Baby Inc. worked on the Wolverine project, and at least one mainstream outlet still lists the project amongst Sweet Baby Inc.'s credits. Ironically enough, IMDb. Side note, there are 14 projects credited to them over there. If anybody wants to do some digging, here you go. And earlier they mentioned that industry coverage. They gave the example of the shortcut still lists Marvel's Wolverine amongst their projects. Insomniac's narrative staff did publicly vouch for Sweet Baby Inc., which was easy to find. Still makes me wonder what they were on when they publicly vouched for them. I smell a lot of copium really, so that gives us an idea. The last 2 statements are that Sony or Insomniac cut ties with Sweet Baby Inc., remaining to be a rumor. And they speculate that the removal of upcoming titles from Sweet Baby Inc.'s website leaves room for interpretation. And this is the best take I've seen so far from journalists, and I'm glad that I didn't have to read an article like this one. Or this one. But regardless, here we go! The moment people have been waiting for. Grab your popcorn, pitchforks, and torches. Let's get this party started. Borderlands 4 performance is poor. One of these statements came from RX Gaming video where he said he needed frame gen to get to 60 FPS. Without it, his RTX 3070 drops to 30, and here's the best part. They played the game on 1440p minimum settings with their 3070 and an i7 12700K CPU. To give you an idea of how bad this is optimized, in the description I'll leave a link to Gamers Nexus articles covering both the best CPUs for 2024 and an article about performance of a 1080 Ti in 2024. Why I'm doing that? It benchmarks both the CPU and the GPU comparative to what was released then and how it stacks against the 1080 Ti, which is practically Nvidia's MVP card, especially for its time. And also that's going to give you an idea of how unoptimized the game is, considering you'll be able to see graphs and more graphs, all the graphs. But anyway, I digress. That's not all, as the gamer also reported on it and showed it's being reviewed as mostly negative on Steam because of the performance. Oh, but don't worry, just look at the critics' reviews, it will be all fine. It's such an amazing game, you don't get to play. Now, please, Pitchford, give me my money. Ah, brother. And speaking of the man himself, another L take from Pitchfork himself. Pitchford. It's insane. And the take boils down to him using us as beta testers. He made a statement responding to a journalist writing a review, and the statement basically sums up to, you don't have the top of the line hardware. Yeah, reading this and saying that kinda killed some brain cells. Even worse, he wrote, "That's it. The expectation for using a below minimum spec machine should be that the game is unplayable. That the game runs at all on your system is a miracle. Mind you, here are the specs of the journalist's rig. Motherfucker, the specs are above the minimums for your unoptimized slob that you call a game. It apparently requires a miracle and a blessing from your local religious leader in order to get it to work. Thanks, Chief. I'm gonna find a priest to bless my rig if I wanna play that game, just to be on the safe side. But you know, real gamers would have found a way to buy the game. Same goes for real game developers, they would have found a way to make this game run properly. But I digress. Now, hindsight is 2020 because the specs weren't there originally, but the reply is the crazy part. He wrote, "For what it's worth, I may be conflating, quote, recommended specs with, quote, required specs." Oh, brother! He's basically the face of the game and didn't start with, "my bad," or "sorry." This might not be that bad, but following with, and I quote, "Day 1 patch has some key improvements and optimizations. I just want everyone to have realistic expectations for performance." Just comes off as another person mentioning us being beta testers for a full-price AAA game. And when you thought this joke stopped writing itself, the punchline kicked in. He ended this whole thing with, "We're confident in the game's performance and optimization, especially given what the software is doing under the hood, while having the game run with the Nouveau." I can think what the software is doing under the hood. It's struggling to breathe. I'm not done yet though. Watch this.
And this gives me a sight, right?
No, that's the left trigger. You could hold LB, which is the top thing there. Yeah, hold that. Wait, what?
We just went to...
What happened?
I don't know.
Oh, you crashed the game?
How?
Yes, you saw that correctly. On Team Coco's video, the game crashed. Best part, or worst part if you're Gearbox, is that the pop-up told us more than the executives want to admit. It said, and I quote, "Multiple crashes detected. The game has crashed more than once recently." Absolute cinema, ladies and gents. Absolute cinema. Yeah, I'm confident in your game's performance and optimization as well, Pitchford. It runs like hot shit and performs like hot shit as well. A friend of mine also sent me another video of something similar happening and the game kept crashing within the first minutes. Yes, minutes, not seconds. That's AAA studio quality right there. Another YouTuber, Cider Spider, never managed to get past the settings. He spent 10 minutes trying to get it to play just for his PC to blue screen upon trying to start the campaign. His last attempt resulted in the game crashing again upon clicking the hard difficulty. It's wild to think Randy Pitchfork wants us to have, quote, realistic expectations when the game runs like crap. If you still think this is just a random coincidence, just go look at the Steam reviews. They'll tell you all that you need to know about what's happening on PC with this hot shit. And in other news, the game that always comes to you like an unwanted child during Halloween. And yes, I'm talking about Concord. And the developers of the game, because one of them laments that the company didn't do any counter-programming and allowed the supposed fake narrative to spread. Oh brother, I can already hear their tears past the concrete walls of the commie blog that I live in. This gem of a statement came from a podcast where one of the developers shared a long-ass statement about how people made up their minds based off a dash, implying they got cut off, making me think they realized that the option was made up based on their action. They even believe that they can sit down and convince people to be 100% on board with them. The delusion is out of control here. Moving on a bit further, one of the developers added, "It's just weird that there is an audience who's constantly wanting to be excited that something fails. But the reality behind it is we're just looking at our keyboards and then we're like, oh, no job today." But here's the thing, yes, there is that community that is excited that something failed, and it does suck that all of you lost your jobs. But that's the price you pay for making a terrible game filled with DI nonsense. Gamers will not reward a bad product with success, they will reward it with failure, and in your case, you fucking trumped the Titanic. The saddest part is that one developer who realized it was a lost cause and accepted the fact that it will fail. I really hope he has his life figured out. Our man was innocent in all of this. The rest of the article is yet again the developers being in an echo chamber, so I won't bore you with that. And speaking of more DI bullshit, fellow YouTuber Smash JT also showed that Team Liquid, instead of spending resources making their esports team better, they instead made a team called Liquid Women in WoW for creative visibility for women and gender minorities within the WoW community. And here I am, today years old, when a new term drops. Oh, the 21st century is fucking wild. This team is apparently supposed to bring them up to the male counterparts. Spoiler alert, they didn't talk about that. They even mentioned the race to world first. Well, here's the thing. Anyone can compete in that. It's just that some of the guilds don't want to deal with scheduling issues or are not interested enough in doing that. Alright, couple of things here. First, for a guild to prep to raid on a race to world first level, 1, you need buckets of gold. 2, you need people to organize raiding, getting gear, when, who's gonna do what, how much time you have. You need people to watch for other guild strategies in case somebody, I don't know, forgets to go dark during a race and shows something that you didn't see. And lastly, considering I've done some mythic raiding in the past when I played WoW, let me tell you, it's a pain in the ass trying to manage 20 people without optimizing for classes on a fight-by-fight basis, especially before Blizzard decides to nerf the encounter to a level that a decent player can come on any random class and clear it. Jesus. But no, they want to bring them to parity with their male counterparts. Worst part of all of this is they bring misogyny at the end, making it seem like that's widespread. But the thing is, I doubt that, honestly, is as big as they implied it to be. Hey, one of the Echo casters was an ex-mythic raider from Castle Lathria to Nuremberg Palace. All I'm gonna say is, Max, good luck with all of that, and I hope this doesn't hamper Team Liquid, because as someone who watches the race to world first, I'd much rather see a 3-way race instead of it devolving down to Echo versus Method, because a 2-horse race is not as fun as having a 3-way tie for the championship. Oh, and real quick, apparently Digimon Story Time Strangers will use body type A and body type B bullshit instead of male and female. And my red flags are raised here because of it. Gonna be on the lookout for more news on the game in case this turns into another raging dumpster fire of DEI. Fingers crossed it doesn't. Moving on, Nintendo managed to win a lawsuit. Not surprising. Good news, it's not against Pocket Pair. It's against the MIG distributor. On the 5th of September 2025, the court documents confirmed that Daily is gonna pay Nintendo a total of $2 million in damages, with additional injunction preventing him from engaging in any activity that might be linked to selling, marketing, or promoting piracy devices such as MIG Switch and MIG Dumper. What, you thought this was a reference to planes? What do you think this is, War Thunder? Anyways, regardless of whether you are on Nintendo's side or sailing under the Jolly Roger, I will say they sure are ruthless when it comes to piracy. Now, for the reason why I affectionately call them Craptendo, last week, Nintendo and the Pokemon Company received a US patent on summoning a character and letting it fight on your behalf. The patent specifically describes these situations. A console or other system is being used to run a video game from storage. The player controls a character in, quote, virtual space. The player can perform an input command to make a, quote, sub-character appear, i.e. summon another character. If there's an enemy where the sub-character appears, the player can control a battle between the sub-character and the enemy. If there's no enemy where the sub-character appears, the sub-character will automatically move around. The player can move the sub-character to a different location on the field, and if an enemy is there, they can control a battle between the sub-character and the enemy. This feels very targeted at Palworld because these mechanics align precisely one-to-one with it. This can also hit games like Shin Megami Tensei, Terraria, their competitor Digimon, and likely any game that has a summoner-based class, MMOs included. I still can't believe such a patent was allowed to pass in the USA. This shit is so vague, and there's no way this could survive in court. Mind you, I'm not a lawyer, so take what I say with a grain of salt. Not sure who decided to let this one go through, but all I want to know is, Nintendo, how much did you pay the motherfucker? Regardless, this doesn't bode well for the games industry, nor for gamers if this remains unchallenged. And I do hope somebody challenges it and proves that Nintendo doesn't own this patent. And in other news, Sega is accused of using police to recover Nintendo dev kits it had, quote, negligently disposed of. Now, bear with me, this will take some context for the full story to be explained. Time Extension previously reported a fundraising drive for a non-profit preservation group to save a collection of undumped Game Boy Advance, DS, DSi, and 3DS games that were at risk of falling into the hands of private collectors. But the situation took a turn for the worst. In July, where it was reported that the seller of the collection was raided by British police and the haul was seized. Those were originally rumors, and now they can reveal that it's true while mentioning that Sega was involved. The seller reported that a removal worker arrived with a, and I quote, a van load of items that reportedly came from Sega's office clearance after the company relocated its UK office. The seller agreed to purchase consoles with the intention of reselling them online, and a private investigator approached him pretending to be a buyer. And his house got raided by the police a month later, with a warrant for alleged money laundering, while seizing development kits and game cartridges. Here's the thing. The seller claims that he sent Sega multiple formal legal letters and that Sega was, quote, entirely silent throughout this process. He even wrote a letter to Sega's CEO, and nothing happened on that front. The interesting part is that the police sent him a formal disclaimer request, effectively asking him to relinquish ownership of the consoles. He also added, and I quote, if the police truly believe the items were stolen, then legal title would have remained with Sega from the start, and there would be nothing for me to disclaim. By asking me to disclaim, they implicitly acknowledged that I did hold legal title. I refused in writing and asked to be kept informed of any forfeiture proceedings so I could secure representation. I have received nothing further. Smart lad, if I do say so myself. This whole fiasco made him believe that it was intent by Sega to recover items it shouldn't have ever sold. FYI, development kits. I mean, those don't belong to the publisher or developer in the first place. They're always under the ownership of the provider, and in this case, that would be Craptendo. So far, Sega hasn't said a thing. And lastly, 007's First Flight franchise art director admits that steps were taken to avoid certain traits of Bond. In a discussion with the art director behind the game, that discussion turned to James Bond's traits, primarily his alcoholism and womanizing traits. The part that rubs me the wrong way is when the director was asked about this, he basically gave a statement that can be summarized as, yeah, we only looked at the traits we liked and removed the unliked traits, particularly changing who he is as a character. He also said, and I quote, So, regardless of gender, it's important for us that we have people around him that can push him. And because we don't have a singular dogma in the company, we'll have these discussions lively whenever we portray Bond, which to me doesn't sound like they want to portray Bond the way he should be portrayed. Instead, they just made a version for a different audience. An audience that most likely never even engaged with the character. Oh boy, can't wait for the release. This will blow up one way or another. But anyways, that's it for this week. Again, if you like the content, hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.